Hey everyone, Bruce Eckfeldt here. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Make sure that you subscribe and turn on notifications so we can let you know when the next video is posted. You can also check us out at eckfeldt.com for more great content. With that, let's go check out the video.
You're listening to Scaling Up Services, where we speak with entrepreneurs, authors, business experts, and thought leaders to give you the knowledge and insights you need to scale your service-based business faster and easier. And now, here is your host, business coach Bruce Eckfeldt.
Welcome, everyone. This is Scaling Up Services. I'm Bruce Eckfeldt. I'm your host. And our guest today is Chris Voss, and Chris is CEO and founder of the Black Swan Group. We're going to find out a little bit more about his background, and he is the author of Never Split the Difference, which is one of my favorite books on negotiating. And it's a little different take. I'm excited to have this. I think we're going to get some good insight and some good perspective on approaching negotiation. So with that, Chris, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Bruce. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah. So, and one of the things I love about your book, and I've got a lot of, business folks, business friends that talk about Never Split the Difference. But the curious thing for me, or the thing that I love about it, is your background, because you don't come out of business, right? You're coming out of FBI, a whole different world when it comes to negotiating. In business, we're, trying to get, another 2% on a deal. That's a different case than the kind of stuff you have to deal with. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how the book came about, and then we can get into some of the concepts.
Well, it's true. I am a recovering FBI agent. I've been in recovery for about 11 years now. Yeah. I'm a FBI hostage negotiator. Was FBI's lead international kidnapping negotiator. And really, one of the big differences, because there's kind of two tools in all business negotiations. I mean, there's a tactical application of empathy. The mercenaries' empathy, the empathy that Stephen Covey was really talking about. Seek first to understand, then be understood. Why do you want to understand? Because you want to be understood. You're trying to get your point across. Yep. That was a fundamental basis of, bank robbery hostage negotiations, barricade hostage negotiations. Whereas a hostage negotiator, I want to get everything. And, as a friend of mine used to say, we sold jail sentences and we had buyers. Hostage negotiator is the ultimate cold caller.
Yeah.
And see, the thing is, though, we repeat customers, so we can't lie to people.
I like it.
I think hostage negotiations, you can say whatever you want because it's a one-off. You're never going to see that guy again. Well, that's not true. If they, if we talk to them, they probably didn't kill anybody. If they didn't kill anybody, there were no acts of violence. They're not going to do that much time in jail. They're going to get out. We're going to see them again. So we had repeat customers.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
There was actually a situation where one guy who'd been on the run for about 10 days and committed 4 homicides. It occurred in Baltimore, one of the largest manhunts in the history of that city, the largest manhunt. When they cornered him, Baltimore County negotiators were a little amped up. The first guy on the phone was a little rattled, and a bad guy literally said to him, "You're not doing a good job. You're supposed to be establishing rapport with me."
This is coaching. This is the perpetrator coaching the hostage negotiator. I love it.
Yeah, because he'd been barricaded before.
Yeah,
we got repeat customers.
I guess let's talk just a little bit about the history of that whole kind of negotiating, because I think, there's been developments, right? The whole kind of strategy that you use as a hostage negotiator, over the last, 50, 60, 70 years. What have you learned? I'm assuming psychology and all these kind of things have had a big impact on the strategy of negotiating in these kind of situations.
Well, there wasn't much outside of practical application before neuroscience that really had any kind of impact. And neuroscience has actually told us we were right all along. Okay. Hostage negotiation first thought that it was, it was BS and, who was the best BSer. And so when they first invented it back in the 70s, they went to psychologists, they went to business, and they kind of tried bargaining skills. And then they found out that it wasn't really bargaining, it was crisis intervention. Yeah. It was emotional intelligence is what it really was. It's emotional intelligence. Yeah. And so the first big shift was to get really, psychology's not, it's going to sound harsh. You psychologists out there, I apologize, but you guys you're going to have a hard time arguing with me. Psychology was never really that much about emotional intelligence. And so we began to actively apply emotional intelligence just by trial and error, learning the hard way. And the real big shift was probably along around the mid to late 90s, away from BSing psychology much more into and I'm not calling psychology BSing them. Those are two separate things.
Okay.
Much more into crisis intervention, which now we just look at as emotional intelligence. And it's kind of interesting how it's come full circle in a business community, because now there's an old saying, IQ gets you hired, EQ will get you fired. If you don't have EQ, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Your resume will get you in the door, but your emotional intelligence, your application of emotional intelligence differentiates you from everybody else. And that's really what hostage negotiation always was. It was emotional intelligence.
Yeah. And what were the basic strategies? I mean, when you look at it from an EQ lens, what is the process, or when you're dealing with a hostage negotiation, what is the basic kind of levels or process that you're trying to work through from a process point of view?
Well, we're trying what we now in a Black Swan group call trust-based influence. We're trying to establish trust-based influence. Now, there's it seems indirect, but it's a massive time saver. And the other thing too, trust-based influence is durable. It's when you have a great relationship with somebody. It's a business colleague that you guys only touch base every few months, but you're on the same page immediately. Most sales, if you will, traditional sales is this yes momentum, or this momentum selling crap nonsense.
Yeah.
And you got to be in a room with the person the whole time to see that through. Now, that's not physically possible. That's why so many deals fall apart. Because as soon as you get out of the room, this old yes logic crap that you're using on people falls through. And they realize, hey, they get a sense of unease.
Yeah.
And they realize that, this logic fable that you spun on them, it doesn't really apply when they get back to their office and there are real problems, and they fail to follow through. That's why yes is nothing without how.
Yeah, so it just doesn't hold up once they kind of go back to their normal conditions, normal environments.
Nah, it doesn't hold up at all.
So talk to me about trust. So if we're using this trust-based influence strategy, what are the elements of trust? What do I do, or what do I need to have to build that trust?
Well, the first thing is really substitute the word predictability for trust.
Okay.
We want to know what's going to happen. We're a lot more comfortable with what's going to happen. And we want the person we're talking to not to be perfect, to be accountable, which means, we can get them on a phone. And really, they don't waste our time.
Yeah.
So, and then they've demonstrated competence, which is not the same as confidence.
Oh, sorry. So competence versus confidence. Okay.
Exactly. A lot of people say, I'm going to be really confident. Like, I had an ex-girlfriend of mine. She used to like to say, I may not always be right, but I'm never in doubt.
One of my favorite phrases.
Yeah, but you know what? That person's confident. They're not competent.
Yeah, it's better to be right and not have doubt. But
yeah. But I mean, if somebody doesn't know something, instead of bullshitting them, you say, that's a really good question. I'm gonna find out. I don't know. And then you can go, all right, so here's what's important to you, because every question really reveals what's important to people. You got to make sure you get that right. There's an old phrase, a question behind the question. You ask me a question, if I answer it initially, the end of my answer is always going to be, what makes you ask?
Interesting.
Because I really got to find out that I dialed in on the right topic. And I would say at least 2/3 of the time, you didn't ask me the question right, which means my answer was flawed. So if I leave out what makes you ask, I'll think I've answered your question when in fact, unfortunately, you didn't really either. You just didn't ask me the question right.
I like that, because I think there's kind of this assumption that the person that we're speaking to or negotiating with or whatever, having this conversation with is perfectly clear and perfectly knowledgeable. and I think that idea of, the what makes you ask question is kind of this acknowledgement that they may not know exactly what they want to hear or what they're trying to figure out. And it sort of shifts it to a little bit more of a sort of consultative approach, or you're asking the question, but you're also finding out what new information or what new questions that poses to the person, and how do you continue that conversation. I think it's a good one. And we use that in sales a lot. I mean, just kind of that whole, consultative selling, half the job is helping the customer figure out how to buy, not just trying to figure out how to sell them.
Right.
Okay. So that's anything else with trust? Anything else that goes into this kind of concept of trust?
Predictability. And here's the crazy thing about predictability that most people don't realize. You're going to call, typically you're in an implementation relationship, or you're selling something. Mm-hmm. You only call them 1 or 2 times, when you have good news, when you have bad news. That makes your contact completely unpredictable, because you don't know when you're going to have either.
Yeah. In fact, it's always a surprise. It's almost the reverse. It's like when I hear from you, I know I'm going to get a surprise. It's like the opposite of predictability.
There you go. Exactly right. So on a regular basis, like I got a business relationship now in this company, they keep me in the dark until they have something good to report. Consequently, while I'm in the dark, I'm like, all right, the clock is ticking. I'm gonna start the implementation on my own. They don't have any idea how many problems they're causing for me in this relationship. I can't be kept in the dark, but that's what ends up happening. And so if we just had a regular touch base call once a week on the status, and even if there's nothing new, a touch base that says there's nothing new. I'm like, we went out, we did this, we got nothing out of it. Yeah. Now I'm informed. The unpredictability is gone. But most people won't do that because they feel like, if I go out and I talk about my efforts without results, then I'm going to look stupid and I'm look like I'm failing. So I'm not going to do that. The flip side of it is that ignores human nature. Now they're losing my trust every single day that they do that to me.
Yeah. I can see the dilemma though, as a kind of service provider. It's like, you want to, you don't want to have a call if you don't have, at least relevant information, ideally positive information, kind of the call without any substantive meaning, is difficult. And the flip side is when you do get something good, you want to call right away. So, saving it to the status call, I can see it being a challenge. But I guess if your focus is building trust rather than just trying to get a one-off win or deal with a one-off situation, establishing a regular routine is going to build that better.
Yeah, and little things like that. In my company, one of the mantras we live by is ignore human nature at your peril.
Yeah.
You may not like it, but there's no avoidance of this issue. Is that keeping people in the dark and uncertainty is a daily deterioration of trust.
Yeah.
There's no avoiding that.
Well, and it seems like many business environments now are just so much more kind of complex and dynamic, and business is moving just more quickly these days. It seems like there's a more of a chance of that. It seems like that kind of dynamic is increasing in the general business world.
Yeah, it is, and that's why that's why 80% of the people out there are mediocre, and I only like dealing with superstars.
Yeah, A players. Yeah. So you've had this long legacy in the hostage negotiation situations. How have you been applying it to businesses? Let's talk about some of the services you provide. What kind of companies are you working with? What are you helping them do? And then what are you teaching them? What are you leveraging in terms of the insights that you've developed over time?
Yeah, the people that we're coaching through their negotiations are killing it. They're just killing it. Yeah. We work with companies across the spectrum. We prefer to work with high performance individuals, which is not the same thing.
Okay.
There's a reason that 40% of the Fortune 500 are going to be gone in 10 years.
Yep.
Most companies, their culture's a mess. They don't have a learning culture.
Yep.
We run into company after company that leaves your development to you. If you want to get better, it's on you.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people at the top of their company are like, look, I developed myself on my own. That's how I got better. It's this whole projection bias crap. I took my career into my hands.
Yeah. And therefore everyone else should too.
Everyone else should too.
Yeah.
And then simultaneously they say to themselves, why is our turnover lower? Why do people leave us? Why do the talented people leave us?
Yeah. It's funny. I run into that one. So I end up coaching a lot of founders and CEOs, and oftentimes we have this conversation and they'll be complaining about somebody and they're like, well, they didn't figure it out on their own. They should have done the research. They should have just, a really good person would have done that. That's how I did it. I'm like, oh, wait a minute. If that's how you did it, if you want more people like you around you, how's that going to play out? What did you do? You left your company and started a company.
Right.
You're just going to find a whole bunch of people that want to leave you.
Right.
So this kind of projection bias is huge.
Yeah. And then, and then the real ramifications of that, because, one of the theories is, what if we invest in them and they leave us? And what if we don't and they don't leave?
Yeah.
So, who's going to stick around? The people that you're not investing in, why do they stick around? They're there for a paycheck. They're not there to help you get better. You're not investing in them. They care as much about you as you've demonstrated you care about them. There's the culture problems in corporate America are crazy. Daniel Coyle wrote a great book called The Culture Code.
Yeah.
And I wish the hell every senior executive would read it because it's phenomenal.
Yeah. Yeah. So that really gets you this kind of A player. So you've decided that in order to be successful, or in order to really leverage your kind of capabilities, you need to be working with A players, these high performance individuals. What else is on your litmus test of when you're speaking with a prospect or a potential client? What do you look for? What are the other characteristics that you look for?
Well, we teach people to tease out whether or not, real quickly, to tease out whether or not an opportunity is real. Now, in reality, anywhere from 20 to 80% of the opportunities that come people's way are fake opportunities. Or, it's fake news. It's fake opportunities. People are looking for free consulting, or they're looking for you to come up with a competing bid. There's an interesting book that came back in 2011 called The Challenger Sale, and they quantified it that said every bit of 20% of the opportunities that come your way are fake opportunities.
Yeah.
I think the number is actually much higher than that, because a lot of people won't admit that they say they're open to working with you when in fact they're not, because of emotional biases that they're unwilling to admit.
Yep.
But so, one of the reasons why, we increase deal velocity with people that we coach is, first of all, think how much time you're going to get back if you can tease out the 20% of fake opportunities and stop wasting time on them.
Yeah, no, I think that's one of the huge kind of inefficiencies in most sales funnels and sales process. I mean, I do it on the recruiting side too, is, wasting your time with candidates, with prospects that are going to end up just either you qualifying or they qualify themselves out at the end of the funnel, and now you've wasted all this time during that process.
Right.
Yeah, so sniffing that out early, being able to sniff that out early is key.
Yeah, sniff it out, and also consequently do it in a way that actually enhances your relationship with that person.
Okay, talk to me more about that.
Because we got to go back to the hostage negotiator's mantra that there's no such thing as a one-off.
Yeah.
This if I've run across this person once, even if they're actively after free consulting, they have no intention of ever paying me.
Yep.
I got to terminate that interaction as quickly as possible, but also as positively as possible.
Yeah.
And here's what,
because there could be a time in a year or two where they come back to you with a real opportunity.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they've got a friend. They got a friend.
Yeah.
Negative karma is never in our favor.
Yeah.
If you act like a jerk,
like
even
that.
if,
Yeah.
people are going to hear about it. I talked to Voss over the Black Swan group, and I just wanted information from them, and they're really lousy about it. Those guys are a bunch of jerks.
Yeah.
I don't need that.
Yep.
Lufthansa approaches us because in reality, they want to know how we do our stuff so that the provider they currently use for training can duplicate it. Mm-hmm. And I sniffed that out really fast.
So A, how do you sniff it out, and then B, how do you pivot that, or how do you terminate that in an appropriate way?
I say, look, you guys got a provider. You've been working with them for a long time. They're phenomenal.
Yeah. What
are you looking at us for? Why would you do business with us? Mm-hmm. And the answer where I know it's a fake opportunity is they say, why wouldn't we? I mean, it's on you to sell us.
So they don't give you a substantive answer. I mean, I got to say that takes a lot of emotional intelligence to be able to have that kind of conversation with a prospect that early, to almost kind of unsell or just kind of question the prospect's desire to do business. I mean, because it's somewhat not counterintuitive, but at least counter-reactional. Like getting a lead, you'd want to be like all over it. Sure, yeah, like let's talk about everything you want.
Right,
let's talk about everything you need.
Yeah, you sucker for it. I mean, and that's why the people that we're teaching kill it, because we're doing something counterintuitive, but we're also doing it in a respectful way.
Yeah, so talk to me about the respectful side. How do you make it how do you not just hang up the phone?
I'm going to ask that question early on, then I'm going to ask some confirming questions. I know what the profile, if you will, of someone who's never going to hire us looks like.
Yeah.
So, but if they say, why wouldn't I? What that does is it triggers visioning answers.
Okay.
Now, what I've done is I've actually caught them off guard. Now, if they ever had any intention of doing business with me, they would have already thought about it. They'd have an answer. Mm. And what I'm looking for, hostage negotiators, what we do is we find out what's in your head. And then we use the same set of skills, if there's a deal to be had, to get you to take another look, to get in there. There's no decision without vision. So I got to know what your vision is to start with. And then I've got to use this set of skills, this what we refer to as tactical empathy. And I'll tell you why we call it tactical empathy in a minute.
Yeah.
But I'm going to use a set of skills called tactical empathy to get you to willingly take another look at things.
Yeah. I like this. I mean, I often use the idea of you have to understand the frame, like, figuring out the other person, whether it's a management situation or a sales or, negotiation, it's like figuring out the other person's frame. Because the problem is that if you look at their situation with your frame, you're bound to make mistakes. You're bound to, value things in the wrong way. You're bound to miss factors or facets or concerns or fears. And so, understanding that other person's frame is kind of, key to any of this kind of how to have any kind of connection, conversation, whether you're negotiating or whether you're just trying to manage somebody. I guess management is a form of negotiation at some level, that understanding that thing. And I guess it's, it's the essence of EQ, but
it is. No, you're dead on.
Yeah. I think you're framing it for me well. I like it.
Yeah, and frame is a relatively common term of someone who's come to have a good gut instinct for this. I mean, you don't really know exactly what it is, but in your world, all right, so frame, a picture frame, it indicates perspective. I really need to get into their perspective. That's a good term.
Yeah. So understanding their perspective, understanding that frame. So I like this idea that if the way that you can sort of suss out whether or not someone has a real intention of hiring you is to kind of test if they've really have a full thinking around the process. And if you're able to determine that, they haven't thought about these questions, which means they're not approaching it from a real engagement, they're approaching it from a research point of view, that's your tell. That's the indicator to you that this is not a viable or a real engagement opportunity. But by asking those questions, what you're saying is that you begin to show kind of your power of insight and power of questioning, that when they do come up with a real one, they'll be thinking of you, or at least they'll have you in mind in a positive way of being, hey, this is someone I should go talk to.
Right. Okay. Yeah, which then kind of gets us all to another counterintuitive approach. You can't get away with a mediocre last impression.
Yeah.
Now, people put all their effort into the first impression because we're scared to death of a bad first impression, and then we end up making mediocre last impressions, and a last impression is a lasting impression. We just screwed ourselves.
Yeah.
I ran across some data probably back in 2008 or so, Gallup organization, on how we remember. We don't remember based on the way things happen. We do not remember chronological order. Okay. We remember the most intense moment and how it ended.
Yeah.
Which then really takes the first impression almost entirely away. Your first impression only needs to not be bad.
Yeah, you just don't screw it up.
Right.
Yeah.
And there ain't that much effort there.
Yeah.
The amount of effort that's actually put into first impression, if you took all that and put it into your last impression, you now would build your deal pipeline, your customer pipeline, your opportunity pipeline in a massively huge way. And that's how it continues to come back to you. So you make sure that your last impression is really built around all the stuff that you were willing to kill for in the first impression. How much regard you have for them, how the fact that you're talking indicates you'd love to have a long-term prosperous relationship. Just take all that stuff from the beginning and at least repeat it at the end.
Yeah, kind of bookend it. All right. So let's talk about tactical empathy. That was your term?
Yeah, because we just know so much more about how the brain works. I know what I'm looking for now, and I know how to dial up negative emotions, and I know how to dial down negative emotions and dial up positive. But the one thing that we know now more than anything else is negative emotions, fear of loss, is the outsized driver of decision making.
Yeah.
Now that seems like, well, duh, of course, right? But nobody applies it that way, because 70% of buy decisions are made to avoid loss, when in fact everybody out there is pitching gain.
Yeah, I'm going to increase your business by X. I'm going to generate this many more revenues or much more profit. Okay.
Right. But wait a minute, that flies in the face of what we just discussed.
Yeah, it does.
People are buying to avoid loss, not to accomplish gain. And you get a lot of people that say, oh, no, I've made a lot of deals pitching gain. Yeah, but your batting average is a third of what it should be.
Yeah.
There's another fact that's out there is that 50% of customers have made up their mind before they talk to a salesperson. Yet no salesperson's close rate is 50% of initial contacts. What's wrong with the math?
Yeah.
I mean, there's an astonishing difference there, because if a salesperson is closing 20% of their initial contacts, they're probably the top salesperson in the history of that company. Because
they're really closing 40% of possible contacts. You're saying 50% of the contacts are just off the table. They're pre-decided.
Well, there's the issue. How many of them have the decision they made is they're not going to do business with you?
Oh, I see. Okay, because the decision could be either way.
Right. But the decision's already been made. So what is that decision? But then there's a fair amount of people that called you intending to do business with you, and you lost those people.
Yeah.
Why did you lose those people? Well, there's if you're pitching gain and they're looking, every salesperson knows you're supposed to look for the pain. That's loss. So if that's true, why are you pitching gain?
Yeah. Well, so how do we do this without being fear-mongering and just negative about it?
There you go. And that's the challenge. And that's, again, where you do it by applying empathy first, tactically, instead of going straight for the throat. There's a sequencing issue. Bob Mnookin is the head of the program on negotiation at Harvard. I learned a lot from Bob. I talk about him in the very first part of the book. And his negotiation book, the second chapter is titled The Tension Between Empathy and Assertiveness, because we think we have to do one or the other. When in fact, the title is a red herring, if you will. It's meant to be deceptive, because you get halfway through the chapter and you go, wait a minute, Bob's not contending there's a tension. He's contending that empathy is necessary first to be assertive.
Yeah.
And most of us, when someone's been assertive with us, it's been blunt force trauma.
Yeah.
We think assertion is combat.
Yeah.
And nobody takes the time to assert in a way that the other side can hear. You assert, you feel slapped around. I would remind you that if you don't do this, you're screwed. In sum and substance, and sometimes not much more sophisticated than that. How do you do it in an emotionally intelligent way? You precede it with empathy that's designed to hit certain parts of the other person's brain first, so they can't hear you.
Okay. And so what are some of those parts, and what are some techniques? Let's give some examples or some specifics.
The first one is it's as simple as tone of voice. Like if we get a contract that's got a work for hire clause in, my company doesn't do work for hire, period, for anybody. Doesn't matter. If you offer me $20 billion, because work for hire, we lose control of our intellectual property, subsequently our future. So you got to give me enough money to compensate me for the rest of my future. If I get a contract with a work for hire clause, and I don't call the guy up and I say, look, Bruce, we don't do work for hire. Let's get this clear right now. That would be bad tone of voice, bad assertion. Instead, I'm going to call you up. I'm going to say, Bruce, I get bad news. And I'm going to say it like that. And then I'm going to shut the front door. I'm going to shut up. I'm not going to say another word. So
what's the bad news? Tell me.
Yeah, there you go. And that's exactly what you'll do. Now, the important part of that dynamic is I'm making sure you don't get caught off guard.
Yeah.
Because catching somebody with bad, hey Bruce, how the kids today? I mean, you watched the game last night? I really wish the Lakers could make the playoffs. When they added, all this BS nonsense.
Yeah.
Right. And you're sitting there wondering, what's the by the way here?
Yeah, you're waiting for the shoe to drop. Yeah.
But that means I'm trying to butter you up. I'm going to catch you off guard and say, Bruce, I get bad news, man. And then I'm not going to proceed till you give me to proceed, permission to proceed. Mm-hmm. You're now prepped. You got your guard up. You're going to appreciate the fact that I let you put your guard up. I'm going to say, Bruce, I'm sorry. We don't do work for hire.
Yeah.
Now, there's another thing I did. First thing I did was before I hit you with the bad news, I said, I'm sorry. Instead of what most people do would be like,
combative.
We don't do work for hire. I'm sorry. The I'm sorry came at the end is not as effective.
Yeah.
You need to put it at the beginning. There's a big criticism of women in the business world that they apologize too much. You shouldn't say I'm sorry. It's not that you shouldn't say I'm sorry. It's where you put it that makes all the difference.
Ooh, fascinating. And meaning most people put it at the end as like almost, I'm sorry to have said this to you, as opposed to, I'm sorry for what I'm going to have to tell you right now, because I know it may be hard to hear. Right, I'm going to tell you anyway.
The 2 millimeter shift, right?
Yeah.
It's sequencing. And we understand because of experience in high stress negotiations, and then the neuroscience that backs it up, and the fact that we practice what we preach. Most negotiation consultants you go to, if you severed them from the university they were attached to, they would not exist.
Yeah.
There's only one other viable consultancy out there that I'm aware of that's done really well that wasn't attached to university in some fashion besides us.
Yeah. Why is that? What's the dynamic there?
It's a really good question. I mean, it's absent having a book out, what's going to make you want to go to a negotiation consultant?
Yeah.
Your first question is, why haven't you got a book out?
Thought leadership, kind of reputation, authority.
Yeah. How have you established yourself as an expert?
Yeah.
And even if the book is out, then if you're a practitioner who's really good at it, you probably can't explain it.
Yeah.
And well, what we found in applying it and simultaneously explaining it, first having to explain it to cops whose BS meters are real high.
Yeah.
And if you're not, as an FBI agent trying to teach police officers, talk about a hostile environment.
Yeah.
So being able to explain it effectively is something that my company's how we started from the beginning. There's 4 of us that train. 3 of us were experienced instructors in hostage negotiation. And the 4th guy is probably the most talented one of the whole crew is my son, and he's just been dealing with this stuff since he was 2 years old.
Exactly. He's been trained through trial by fire.
Yeah.
I love it. So let's squeeze in one more. What else do you see that, most people kind of get wrong or misstep when it comes to either, approaching the process of negotiation or the actual negotiation itself? What's another good takeaway for folks?
Well, hear the other side out first. Give them a chance to talk themselves into your deal.
Yeah.
If you want to go first, you're now taking that opportunity away. And there's in whatever you have to say, anywhere from 10 to, 60% of it is going to be perfect for me. I want to find out what that percentage is before I proceed.
Yeah.
I'm not interested in fighting any battles I don't have to fight.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you the opportunity to win the day if you win with my answers.
Yeah.
And that ends up being one of the other stealth time savers. Because now we're dialed in on what really matters if you go first, because you're going to tell me what really matters instead of me having to guess about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I see that one go wrong a lot. People get all amped up and they go running into the negotiation and they're like, let me tell you what we want to do, or here's the offer that we have. And they just start, presentation and documents and points, bullet points and discussion points. And
because they work so hard on it.
Well, they're emotionally invested. Right? It's hard. Yeah, having a little bit of distance from it, and just being willing to know that, hey, this, it may not work. I think people get very caught up into I've got to make it work, and that often skews things. Yeah. I like it. Oh, this is good. So we're going to hit time here. This has been great. I've learned a lot. It's been a lot of fun. If people want to learn more about you, about Black Swan, what's the best way to get that information?
Subscribe to our newsletter. It's a complimentary newsletter. It's very concise, and it's the gateway to everything. Comes out Tuesday mornings, and it's the gateway to our training. We got a lot of free products. We put a lot of stuff out there that's free. I had a friend of mine in the FBI used to like to say, if it's free, I'll take 3.
I love it.
So subscribe to the newsletter. A text to sign up function. Text to the number 22828, and the message you send to 22828 is FBI empathy, all one word. Don't let your spell check autocorrect and put a space between FBI empathy. So it's FBI empathy, all one word, sent to the number 22828. You get a text box back. We'll ask for your email address, and Perfect. It's the gateway.
Perfect. I'll make sure that that's on our show notes too, so people can get that. Yeah, I've seen the newsletter several times. It's great content. So if you're interested in this topic, I highly recommend it. And certainly check out the website, check out the book, Never Split the Difference. Like I said, one of my favorite. Chris, Thanks. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, I enjoyed the conversation. Have a good one.
You've been listening to Scaling Up Services with business coach Bruce Eckfeldt. To find a full list of podcast episodes, download the tools and worksheets, and access other great content, visit the website at scalingupservices.com. And don't forget to sign up for the free newsletter at scalingupservices.com/newsletter.